After I got out of the Army, I planned to open a computer and security equipment store in the Chicago suburbs. The first thing I had to do was find a suitable location. I tried to find a residential area that would be between two Best Buy stores and a good shopping center. On the second day of my search, I found such a place. Driving through the strip center parking lot, I saw a for rent sign on the corner of a nice building. I parked and tried to peer into the dark, empty store when the door swung open, startling me. I stepped back, adopting a defensive stance, and then laughed as two attractive women came out of the store, laughing at me. Sorry for scaring you, big guy. We didn't expect to see a peeping Tom in the middle of the day. Sorry, ladies, but that's the kind of reaction that's kept me alive for the last couple years. If I had an M4 rifle, I'd put a couple holes in you. I'd hate to offend two such nice ladies. You can't be a member of the Chicago SWAT team. You're too easily intimidated. The taller woman grinned. Why were you looking out the window? Are you looking to rent a room? The shorter of the two women asked. Yes, is this space for rent? My name is Carol Hughes. I'm a leasing agent for Midwest Shopping Centers. This is Susan Parker, our banker. At that moment, a tall, good-looking woman reached out a tanned and muscular hand and shook my palm firmly. How do you do? I'm Robert Rogler, but please call me Bob. If you need a banker while you're checking out a vacant space, I guess it's not my place to ask about rent. Susan replied, That's not the point at all. I'm confirming the lease to update the credit file. When the facility reaches a high enough occupancy rate, we'll lower the interest rate on the loan. Then it's the perfect time to negotiate the lease. How much is the rent per month? Carol replied, $1,200 a month plus you pay for electricity. I turned to Susan and asked, How long does the lease need to be for so Carol can get the interest rate down? She looked at me perplexed and replied, We only consider leases that are 6 months or more. Okay, Carol. I will pay you $1,000 a month for this property for 1 year, all up front. Can you do that? It didn't take Carol long to do the math and accept my offer. After accepting the offer, she turned to Susan and said, This guy is a wheeler dealer. He might make a good bank customer for you. Yes, he might be a suitable customer. Here's my card. She looked me over from head to toe, from my shoes to my hair and back again. Carol said, I'll go back to the office and do the paperwork, but first I need to take Susan to the bank. To be more efficient, I can take Susan to the bank and give her a chance to convince me to transfer my accounts to her bank. I hoped my smile didn't look too much like a smirk. Carol agreed, and Susan and I started walking toward the parking lot. I pointed to my brand new Corvette and said, There it is, get in. Wow, what a beautiful car. I've always liked Corvettes, but I've never driven one. Since it was lunchtime, I asked, Do you have time to have lunch with me? She smiled and replied, Yes. Since I don't know the neighborhood, why don't you take us somewhere nice? I tossed her the keys and moved into the passenger seat. Out of surprise, she didn't know what to do. I really don't know how to drive. Are you sure you want me to drive your new car? Get in, and I'll teach you how to drive. Her skirt pulled up her legs as she slid into the low seat. She focused on her tools, not her modesty. I asked, Have you ever driven a car with a manual transmission before? No, but I watched my grandfather drive his work truck, so I have an idea of how it's done. Without turning on the engine, I asked her to engage the first 3 speeds. When she got comfortable with the gears, I said, You hold the shift lever with confidence and focus. I like the way you shift from gear to gear. She didn't react in any way to my remark, but I saw her smile slyly at me. We didn't talk while she drove so she could concentrate on shifting gears, and I didn't make an amazed face at the sound of grinding. When we pulled up to a very nice Italian restaurant, she asked, What have you been doing for the last 2 years that struck you so much when you saw 2 women walking out of an empty store? I spent the last 2 years in the Middle East as a U.S. Army infantryman. There, when an unfamiliar door swings open on you, you better be ready to shoot or die. Since the Army took my rifle away from me, I was going to throw my ink pen at you. I said this with a wide grin to match Susan's huge laugh. Why did you even want to join the Army and go into that dangerous neighborhood? Okay, a little history about me. I'm the son of a U.S. Army colonel and an Iranian nurse. They met when my father was in the U.S. Army Signal Corps, working on radio intercepts of Moscow phone calls from Iran, before the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, Ivan Ushi. They married, I was produced, and I lived the first 18 years of my life as an army brat. 4 years of college led to a dual degree in Arabic and computer science. They don't go together, but those were the two things that interested me. With a sense of patriotism and wanderlust, I joined the army and became an infantryman. Because I have special language skills, I was sent to where the battles were being fought to be a translator for the troops. Was it as exciting as you thought it would be? Did you ever get shot at? It was more interesting than I expected. Yes, I was shot at once. Maybe after our third date I'll show you my wounds. Smiling sweetly, she replied, "Third date? Do I get a vote?" "Well, if you want to see them on our second date, I can push back my modesty just for you," I said with a sly grin. We had a great lunch and she paid for lunch, saying, "It's in the bank. I'm always on the lookout for good customers." As we drove to the bank, she said, "The girls in the window will be dying when I pull up in this car. Then show them a show, get out of the car, show your leg and toss me the keys." Which she did with brilliance and style. She turned and waved her hand at me, opening the door to the bank. I waited until she had been in the office for a few minutes and then called her cell phone. "What time should I pick you up for dinner Saturday night?" "Who is it?" "A guy is giving a girl a ride in his new Corvette and she's already forgotten him. What a tragedy." "Bob, I didn't recognize your voice on the phone. 7 o'clock at night suits me fine. Put on some decent clothes and I'll be dazzling." Saturday night couldn't come soon enough for me as I was excited to spend some time with Susan. "You really do look dazzling this evening, Susan. All the guys at the VFW will be thrilled to see you flaunting it." Grinning, she replied, "If you take me to the VFW tonight, I'll never see your battle wounds. I can show them to you on a second or third date." "No, because there will be no second or third date, and date number 1 will be very shaky." At this, we both laughed, enjoying teasing each other. I made reservations at Capitol Grill for a great steak dinner, if that's okay with you. "I like this place. Do we have time to have a glass of wine here first?" "Yes, there is. I want to see how a successful banker lives in a big city. You have a lovely apartment. It seems very cozy." She laughed and said, "I'm successful, but at the entry level. I'm working on getting to the big level. I bought this apartment 2 years ago, and one day the reasonable rent will go up so much that I won't be able to afford it. So I'm not spending a lot of money on major renovations." As she poured the wine, I noticed a diploma from Northwestern University. I asked, "What's your major?" "Business finance." "That fits your profession as a banker." "Yes, it fits, but I prefer to borrow a lot of money rather than lend it out. I'd like to be a real estate developer, and a few years of financing real estate projects is one of the best ways to learn the craft." We talked some more about her college years and future plans, and then headed out to dinner. Dinner went great. Interesting conversation, great food, and drinks. "How did your computer skills come into play in the military?" "The first combat mission I went on in Moselle changed my duties. We broke into an Iraqi fighter's house and found some computers that my comrades were about to destroy, but I stopped them by saying, 'We have to take them to the intelligence officer.' I collected the computers and their documents and took it all to our camp. When I handed my prize to the G2 officer, they only laughed at me and said, 'Well, what are we going to do with this electronic garbage if we can't operate an Arab computer?' I boldly replied, 'Besides being an army translator, I know how to operate a computer in Arabic, sir.' After that, I was hurriedly sent to the brigade intelligence officer. For several hours, I sat at a desk watched by all sorts of people with gold and silver titles on their shoulders. Suddenly, I stopped work, looked at my watch, and said, 'Oh shit.' That immediately got everyone's attention. Tomorrow, at 0200 hours, we will be attacked from 3 sides. 3 different battle groups will descend on us from 3 different directions. This letter outlines their entire battle plan. If anyone can get me a map, I will point out from which directions they will attack." The decision makers for this sector were already in the room, and I could listen and watch as they worked out plans for airstrikes and artillery fire, while the rebels consolidated their troops at the assembly points. Secrecy was paramount as the rebels undoubtedly had spies/informers in our compound as cooks and laborers. No one below the company commander knew of the impending battle until our Air Force struck first. Then every man, including me, had to run to his assigned fighting position. The rest of the report talked about where the local forces were hiding weapons and gave a general description of the planned attacks. I was privy to a conversation about what unit I would be assigned to the next morning. My days as an infantryman were shortened, as I only got behind the wire when our company was conducting a capture of some insurgent leader. I was the last person to enter any building in search of computers and associated logs, passwords, and other important information. Throughout my service, I saved many American lives by detecting and disrupting enemy operations. I worked not only with computers confiscated by local troops, but also with computers shipped in from other Arab countries. I didn't bother to tell her that many times I had to search for the insurgents' bank records. It turned out that funds were transferred from one numbered account to another numbered rebel account. No names, organizations, or countries were used, just numbers. The funds were probably used to buy ammunition, weapons, food, bribes, and soldiers' salaries. If this money was of value to the enemy, I felt it was my duty to deny him access to these funds. I had the necessary information to transfer the money to any bank in the world. However, only at one bank did I know the routing and transit number, and only at one did I know the account number. It was my personal bank account number. I used my personal laptop to transfer that money to my bank in Chicago. I'll do some research later to see where they went next. At least this month the bad guys won't be able to buy ammo to kill our soldiers. That was my plan until I realized that the account where the released funds went had my name on it. I needed to change that immediately. I asked for and received a 4-day pass to Switzerland, where I opened my own numbered account into which I transferred the rebel funds. No name, no address, just a number, a password, and a secret question. At this point, no one could trace that it was me. Using my personal laptop made the money trail less visible than through an army computer. One of the main criteria for a security clearance was need to know. A general with a top-secret clearance could not review a classified document without providing a need to know for that particular document. For this reason, I did not inform Susan of this source of income that I had created for myself. I continued our conversation. From this description, you can see why I've titled my new book, How I Defeated the Rebels While Sitting at a Computer Desk. It's an interesting story. You are an interesting person. How did you get injured sitting at a computer? Carpal tunnel? She smiled. Sorry, I don't show my wounds until the second date. I think I can do that if you agree. Let's dance cheek to cheek and I'll whisper a top-secret story to you. Laughing again, we left and drove my Corvette to a nice club where we spent the next couple hours. When I pulled up to her apartment, she asked, "Would you like to come in for a while?" "Yeah, I'd really like that." After we had a few glasses of wine, I decided it was time for me to leave, so I asked, "Was this date good enough to have another one?" She replied, "Yes, I have to come on at least a second date to see the wound." "Okay, I'll work something out and call you." "You're not leaving until you get your reward for giving me a very interesting evening." She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around me, and hugged me. The embrace was warm and she rubbed my shirt under my sport coat. I was being pawed while she was figuring out if my body was as good as what I was flaunting. I received a very warm, wet kiss that wasn't as long as I would have liked. This prompted me to call her soon. On our second date, we had a quick dinner and enjoyed a jazz music concert in the park. She asked, "Will you show me your battle wounds during intermission?" "No, I'm a modest man and don't want to make a spectacle of it. Can I wait until we get to your apartment?" She replied, "Sure, by the way, did you get a Purple Heart for that?" I got the feeling that she thought I was tricking her. I braced myself for that and showed her a picture on my cell phone of me in my ceremonial blue uniform with a Purple Heart on my chest. When we got back to her house, I pulled a very official-looking briefcase out of the glove compartment and carried it into her apartment. "Are you going to propose to me tonight?" she asked when she saw the box. Smiling, I replied, "No, you have to press the number 6 for that. That's my Purple Heart. Open it and see if it has my name and the nature of my wound on it." She obediently opened the box and was surprised to note that it was indeed a Purple Heart with my name engraved on the back. She read the order in silence until she said, "Shell fragment in the eye." "Right, notice the scar on your left eyelid?" "How did it happen?" "I was in my quarters making myself an omelet when I heard a loud pop." "A gunshot?" she asked. "No, my egg was of poor quality and it exploded. Part of the egg went into my eye. I went to the medical tent and they pulled out a shard of eggshell. They had to make a report and it said, "The eggshell shard got in my eye, so some clerk issued me a Purple Heart." At this explanation, she pounced on me, and after a few hours of conversation, we got down to business. Over the next few weeks, I advertised for an office manager and was delighted when a woman named Betty Black came to my office in the store. She was about 10 years older than me and quite attractive. She was married to a police officer and had been laid off from Best Buy, but she knew the computer business better than their employees. She said her manager thought she was too old to fit Best Buy's target market. I hired her that same day and we were both very happy with the decision. By then, Susan and I were spending more time together. Life was great until two men in suits came to me. They held out their badges and said they were from the CIA and wanted to talk to me. I almost wet myself imagining what the CIA could accuse me of. They told me they wondered why there were no facilities around the captured enemy offices. I just stared at them and experienced my first attack of froth in years. Foaming is when you are so frightened that your cheeks clench so hard that they pull the foam out of the seat of your chair. They didn't accuse me of anything, just mentioned that recent hacks of rebel computers had revealed several complaints that an American had looted their bank accounts. They waited for my response and I just shrugged and looked at them. Then came the big surprise. They wanted me to work for them as a private contractor. They would pay me $20,000 a month, but they had one condition. The first $500,000 of any funds confiscated from the rebels would stay with me. The rest, no matter how small, would go to the CIA. It turned out that I was the most efficient and productive at hacking into the enemy's computers, and they were willing to pay for it. They were confident that I could free a lot more from the Iranians than they were paying me plus my bonus. Obviously, they planned a careful accounting of our agreement. Although it wasn't said out loud, the implication was that if I reneged on my agreement with the private contractor, they might investigate further to find out who was supplying the rebels with funds. I had accumulated a nice nest egg of terrorist funds. Enemy clerks might think that some of them had transferred money before we took over their headquarters. Even if they knew the Americans had taken their money, they couldn't trace where and to whom it went. By the time I finished serving in Iraq, I had accumulated over $1 million in Swiss bank accounts and $300,000 in a Chicago bank account. That's why the CIA wanted me to keep attacking insurgent bank accounts. The only reason I didn't sign up that day was my growing relationship with Susan. However, being a businesswoman, she decided that a $20,000 monthly paycheck was too good to pass up. I didn't bother to tell her about the bonus program. She was too busy working to think about marriage and relationships, so I had her blessing. As it happened, she needed to move out of her apartment and I didn't want to leave mine, so that night she moved in with me for good. And it was a good night. Since security equipment was one of my company's products, I wired my apartment so I could see what was going on while I was on the other side of the world. I didn't bother to let Susan know about it. I showed her the usual security system that protects against burglary and fire. I offered her the use of my apartment so she would keep it clean and I would pay all the bills. With the money she saved, she could buy clothes to go out on the town with me when I returned. For this new adventure, I decided to spend 3 months in the country and 3 months in the States. I did this for 2 reasons. First, Susan was not a bad candidate for wife, lover, and friend, and I didn't want to be away for too long. Second, this job was very stressful, like any operation in a war zone. I was afraid of burning out and destroying the beautiful place I had created for my life in Chicago. The first stop on my way to the Middle East was a meeting at Langley with the CIA officers I was to work with. They were mediocre people who viewed me as just another asset worth more than a computer but less than a Predator drone. They said they expected me to do well based on what my colonel had told them. They had simple rules. If I screwed up, the deal was off, and I had to find my own way home. If someone died through my fault, they could kill me or give them all the funds I had released. It all depended on the circumstances. It was a long 3 months during which I got myself into a huge pile of shit. There were dozens of unexplored computers scattered all over the command center. Some had files and papers on them. Most didn't. Since our guys weren't doing anything, the bad guys must have known the computer was missing and started developing a Plan B. If I hacked into their computer, the information would be outdated and useless. So the first computers I worked on were the newest ones. They gave the best data that was important to the CIA. Gradually, I was able to get all the computers to reveal their secrets, and this was valuable information that could be used as background to refresh the data being analyzed. I hung charts on the wall showing the interactions between the insurgent units. Our terrorist fighters showed no diligence in hiding or recovering the freed money. I think the Iranians had enough cash, so they just transferred more money into the same accounts. As a result, most of it came under my control. Sometimes I would leave one-third of the cash in the account as bait for them to add more to it. With a numbered account, they didn't know who was withdrawing the money. The money could have been withdrawn by another rebel command group. Susan and I communicated on FaceTime every day. When it was 8:25 p.m. in Chicago, it was 4:25 a.m. in our compound. It was inconvenient, but worth it to talk to her. If she didn't have an early morning schedule, she would call me around midnight and catch me in the morning. I teased her for interfering with dating by acting like a college controller monopolizing her late nights. She laughed and said, "You're the only man I want to talk to in bed." That made me happy, and then saddened me that I couldn't be with her. There was no way I could sit in front of a computer for 12 hours a day. My mind and body would be so inhibited that I would be useless to my employer. I began physical training with the Marines who made up the security contingent at our compound. We would meet early in the morning for calisthenics and then do a group jog in formation. Free weights were available at all times. At first, the Marines didn't want to get involved with one of the spies, but when they learned that I was an Army retiree working on a private contract for the CIA, they accepted me into their group. When the first 3-month internship was over, I met with the senior CIA officer in country to review my work. He was very pleased with the information I had provided him in a timely manner. He did not ask, and I did not mention the freed-up funds I had accumulated during that period. He asked, "Do you want to stay for another 3 months or go to the States for 3 months and then come back?" "I'm going back to the States to marry the most beautiful woman in Illinois. In 3 months, I'll be back here to continue my work. In the meantime, I've trained your raiding parties on what's important to capture when searching for a computer. I've even created a protocol that will hopefully allow me to bypass the terrorist defenses and gain remote control of their computer. This will give me the opportunity, while I am in Chicago, to study it to find the latest information for you." Susan's face shone like a full moon on a dark night as I entered O'Hare Airport 2 days later. I had waited 2 months for the renewed romance to settle, but it hadn't, and that was my cue. This affair was real. The florist outside the computer store made a gorgeous arrangement of colorful flowers and delivered it to Susan with a note. "You are more beautiful than all the flowers. Would you do me the honor of dining with me this Saturday night at an exclusive but stunning restaurant? I would advise you to buy a new dress for the occasion." The restaurant I was referring to was actually a penthouse suite at the Hyatt Hotel. The concierge had a beautifully arranged dinner for two on the balcony overlooking the city, accompanied by a string quartet. The menu included some of her favorite dishes and desserts. The door to the bedroom was closed and there were 4 dozen red rose petals on the floor, lining the path to the bed. She asked where we were going, had we been there before, and what dishes were on the menu. All of this remained a surprise to me, as did the limo that picked us up and delivered us to the Hyatt. The concierge greeted us in the lobby like old friends and escorted us to our penthouse suite. I swear Susan practically danced her way through the crowd of visitors to the elevator. People looked at us like we were movie stars. We had a personal waiter for the evening, offering us champagne flutes as we sat on the balcony and watched the city change from twilight to beautiful night lights. After champagne, a string quartet appeared out of nowhere and played. The dinner was great, the service was exceptional, and the chocolate volcano was magnificent in the dimmed lights. The string quartet left after dessert. The waiter refreshed our champagne flutes, left a domed silver plate on the table next to me, and departed. "You've made a lasting impression on me this evening." I lifted the lid and revealed a small purple velvet box. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" That was all she could say. Her hands were shaking and there were tears in her eyes. I picked up the box and got down on one knee. She started to say, "Yes, yes, yes, yes." Raising my hand to the stop position, I said, "You must wait until I have done my part." She stopped saying anything, but started bouncing in her chair like an ADD child under the influence of sugar. "Susan, I love you more than anything in the world. Will you be my wife and companion for the rest of our lives?" Absolutely. I will marry you. If you want, you can take some time to think about it. I've been gone a long time. You've been gone too long, but I still want to marry you. It wasn't a very big wedding since neither of us had large families. She had more contacts in real estate and banking than family members. We flew to Savannah, Georgia, and enjoyed the timeless southern charm of that city. When we got back to our work stuff, she took me to a few of her social events with realtors and real estate developers who were her clients. Thus began a string of 3 months in heaven and 3 months in hell for me. On our wedding anniversary, I asked, "Do you know a good realtor who could find us a really nice house so I could come home?" "Yes, I know a realtor who can help you find the perfect house. What kind of house would you like?" My lovely wife will decide for herself what kind of house she would like. From what I understand, it can be a brand new house or an old one remodeled to her liking. The only caveat is that the total cost, including furnishings, finishes, and remodeling, must not exceed $1 million. My wife dropped a glass of iced tea and it shattered on the floor. "You're kidding. How are we going to be able to pay that amount of money? This is a cruel joke." "Honey, I have a few investments you don't know about and we can easily do it. I wanted to make sure you married me for love, not because of my immense wealth." She slapped my right hand and curled her lips in a smirk. "Asshole. By the way, this will be a cash deal, no financing required, so use your house hunting skills and find us a great place to spend our eternal honeymoon." Susan did an amazing deal with a divorcing couple who wanted to sell their home quickly for cash. I wasn't home during the massive remodel, but as we chatted on FaceTime, I was kept up to date on everything that was happening and what was coming next. While the house was falling apart, I wanted to install a top-notch security system with hidden camera, microphones, and speakers to my specifications. I started paying more attention to security because an informant had told CIA operatives that terrorists were angry that I, or at least someone, was stealing their money. The last thing I wanted was to be captured by angry, vengeful Muslims. I called Betty at the computer store and asked her for the name of the best private investigator in town. She said, "Tom Pappas is one of our best clients and a very good one. Thorough and professional, but not cheap. He buys high-end surveillance equipment from us. Would you like to know his number?" "Yes, thank you." The conversation with Mr. Pappas was very productive because he knew exactly what I needed and how to install it. Most of the electronic equipment in the house has been integrated into my personal computer system. I can turn on the TV and change channels, so well thought out. Susan was thrilled with her new home and couldn't have expressed her love better than she did. With no time to waste on the dating game that singles play and no husband away from home, Susan devoted her time to developing good relationships with members of the local Home Builders Association. Her loan portfolio at the bank was noticed by first-line lenders and appreciated the variety of loans. Beginning in my 4th year on the job, I noticed a change in the way I was greeted at the airport. They went from jumping in place, sweet hugs, and quick kisses to complaining about the weight of my luggage. The last 2 greetings made me wary. The first unsettling greeting was her impatient wait in the car. "Just take an Uber and go home, I'm busy." After being home for 3 weeks, I tried to nudge her to see if the problem was me, her, or us. "Honey, you seem distracted. Is there anything I can do to help you? Maybe there's something going on at work that's bothering you? If you want to talk about it, I'm all ears." "No, I'm fine." To the average person, this means everything is fine, no problem. To an enlightened person with combat experience, it screams, "Coming, coming, an artillery strike is imminent." I remained silent and continued reading the news on my laptop. After a few minutes, I heard her say, "We have nothing in common anymore. I'm busy at work and you've been thousands of kilometers away from me for 6 months. While you're here, you're still sitting at your computer working on something in Arabic. What are you, an Iranian spy or something?" I would have laughed, but now was not the time. I defiantly turned off my computer to give my attention only to her and said, "No, I'm not a spy. You see, my assignments are given by the U.S. Department of Defense. I go through terrorists' computers to gather information about their locations and plans. It's important work for our country." "Well, that makes my husband a boring and uninteresting person, and I don't like that. What would you like me to do to be a more interesting husband? I'm open to suggestions. Knock me off my feet, make me feel important, just do something." "All right, my dear. Here's my plan. Let's go to Vegas and then LA for 2 weeks. Neither of us will take our jobs with us. We'll just be together. Just the two of us. You'll decide what to do, what shows to see. I'll organize everything. Just tell me what you want to do. I don't want to buy tickets for Elvis impersonators while you want to see Celine Dion and Cirque du Soleil. Yeah, that would be a good start. I'll start thinking about it. Tell me what you want to see on this trip. I want to see my wife happy. That's all I want. I guarantee you that I will start paying more attention to you and your needs starting today. The next morning, I set about fulfilling my part of the marital equation. Namely, what the hell is going on here? The trip to Vegas was a wait-and-see tactic to gather information about what was on my wife's mind. Does she have a lover? Who is she spending time with? Am I worrying for nothing? After lunch, I met with Mr. Pappas in his office and explained my situation. I would like your company to monitor my wife's comings and goings. Either you or I can install a car beacon on her Audi. I have already installed the beacon in her cell phone and can connect you to that device. I will be out of the country from September 1st to November 30th, but I can be reached by phone or email. You have already installed a very sophisticated camera system, and I can share information with you as needed. If possible, I would like access to any important information as soon as you discover anything suspicious. There are 2 reasons I wish to utilize your services. There are rumors that the rebels in the Middle East have put a bounty on me, and I want my wife to be protected while I'm gone. She doesn't need to know about this as it might frighten her. I don't want her to worry. Another reason is to keep an eye on her in case she has an affair. This could be the bad guy's way of getting to me. Either way, I have to be ready for any trouble. Wow, Mr. Pappas exclaimed. You seem to know the protocol of my business better than I do myself. I hope I can live up to your expectations. It will be my pleasure to work with someone as knowledgeable as you. Of course, you know this assignment will be expensive. I expect an upfront payment plus monthly expenses, depending on what services will be performed in any given month. I understand and will wire the money for the first month if you let me know your account numbers. Thank you for your help. After that, I began my own investigation. The first thing I started with was Susan's closet, starting at the bottom and working my way up. All the shoe boxes were opened and examined, including what was hidden in the toe of the shoe. The wooden shoe shelf was lifted up and inspected from the back. I then looked in every pants, jacket, shirt, or coat pocket, looking for bits of paper or hidden items. I even lifted paper from all the shelves looking for clues, but found nothing. As I was putting my jacket away in the hall closet, I saw a small travel bag that I hadn't noticed before. It was closed with a small brass lock that was easily opened with a paper clip. Inside was a travel set of French linens, several sets of cheap clothes and shoes. There were no price tags on the items, and they all looked like they had been washed several times. Now I knew why there was no sign of boyfriends or lovers on my cameras. She was on her way to see him. But who was this he who was entertaining her and making her act like a tramp? The last step was to make sure the hidden cameras were still in place and working. I replaced the batteries in all the cameras. I questioned my actions as I was sure there would be evidence in her bedroom. Then it hit me, and I headed for my office. The top drawer of my file cabinet was open and had screwdriver marks on it. That's where I kept my tax returns and investment information. As I pulled out the first of the tax returns, I noticed that the papers were not lying in the order I had left them. Each year's tax return was in a folder with an IRS Form 1040 on top, so I could easily refer to it when needed. While these folders were still neat, they were not in the order I had left them. Someone had pulled out and gone through my tax returns for the past 5 years. Susan always signed our joint returns, but she never looked at every page or took an interest in anything other than how much I owed. She told me she wanted me to overpay so we could have a tax return and considered it a gift, not a return of my own money. I realized that the investment folders had been rummaged through as well, as there was always the most recent statement in front of each folder. These statements pertain to IRA and Merrill Lynch accounts that were opened because of my computer business, my work in the military, or the CIA. There was no record of my offshore or Swiss bank accounts in that box. The only reason she wanted this data without asking me was to prepare for alimony payments in the divorce. The bottom drawer had also been invaded, but there was no defamatory information there. I looked around my file cabinet to see if I had missed any other sign of betrayal. Behind the cabinet where the printer was kept, I found last year's C declaration for the computer company. It looked like someone had pulled out the files, copied them, and put them back in the drawer. This particular page must have fallen out of the stack after being copied. This begs the question, where did these files end up? Were they in the attorney's office or in the safe? In the corner of my office is a large gun safe that holds my guns, the key to the gold coin safe, and several paper copies of offshore accounts I maintain. They had the bank, account number, and password to my secret accounts on them. Of course, they were coded so that the average person could not know their contents. When closing the safe, I always set it to my high school t-shirt number. Right now, it was a 0. I opened the safe, but it was still there just as I had left it a month ago. So I locked it again and set it to 46. The next business of the day was to make a date with my wife for a lovely dinner. After making reservations, I called her office and got to voicemail. My message sounded as follows. Good afternoon, my beloved wife. Would you do me the honor of dining with me tonight at 7 p.m. at La Chez Restaurant? Call me when you can so I can hear your beautiful voice. Goodbye. After the call, I texted her and asked her to read my voicemail. After the invitations were delivered, I put a beautiful new dress on the table that I hadn't seen before for her to wear tonight. The alarm clock was set for 5 p.m., so I had plenty of time to nap, shower, and get ready for her arrival. The alarm rang on time, but I didn't get any texts, emails, or voicemails, so I called and got to voicemail again. I called after showering, shaving, and changing into my best suit, but there was no answer. The computer in my office gave me some interesting information about Susan's cell tracker. It pinpointed the exact location, which turned out to be a high-end office apartment building near her bank's office. The cell phone had been there for several hours. This was probably to my advantage, as I could now start asking innocent questions and pretend I didn't suspect her of infidelity. I left the house at 6:15 to go to dinner and called again to ask her to meet me at La Chez. My plan was to let her embarrass me by not showing up and see if she was sorry or not. The hostess of La Chez realized that I was waiting for my wife. At my request, I was seated in a secluded area. I ordered a bottle of her favorite wine and started playing with my cell phone. According to the tracker, she didn't leave the house until 7:20, so I ordered myself some soup. I began to notice sympathetic looks from fellow diners and restaurant staff. Here's a well-dressed man being set up by his date. At 7:30, my phone vibrated and I saw it was Susan. I answered, "Hi, honey." "Please forgive me, Bob. I'm so sorry. My phone's battery died and I couldn't send a message." "That's understandable," I said with a sigh. "Why don't you come over to my place for dinner? This dinner is for you because you said I wasn't attentive enough." "Are you still waiting for me to show up?" "Yes, Susan. I just had a very tasty soup and my salad is on its way." "Then I'll be there in 30 minutes. I'm really sorry, Bob." "Great. You'll be just in time for dessert and after-dinner drinks." I was just putting the knife away, finishing a wonderful ribeye steak, when Susan burst into the room. She was out of breath, her hair disheveled, and her blouse wrinkled. "I can't apologize to Bob. I really can't. You were trying to make this night special and I ruined it. I'm really, really, really sorry. What can I do to make it up to you? Have you eaten yet? If not, please order something while I get dessert. Then you can tell me about how your day went." "No, I haven't eaten yet, but I'm really hungry. I hear they have a great triple chocolate brownie here that I'd like to try. Please order it and a whiskey on the rocks." I ordered 2 brownies and asked, "So how was your day?" "It was hectic from the start. We were trying to close the loan on that shopping center on Douglas Street, and we had a problem with the wording on the mortgage on the property. The bank thought we were mortgaging 2 buildings, but the borrowers thought it was just one." "Did it take all day?" "No, it started in the afternoon and we're still working on it." "Who was involved in these marathon negotiations?" "Why all the questions, Bob? It's just another day at work for me." "After you failed to return my numerous calls and texts, and then embarrassed me by having everyone stare at me and my 2-cup bottle of wine, I think you need to tell me more than just, 'It's just another work day.' Don't you think that's crossing the line already?" "No, it's not crossing the line, but I don't like being asked like I'm hiding something from you." I raised my eyebrows and asked, "Are you hiding something or someone from me?" "No, I'm not hiding anything," she snapped back. "Then why are you so adamant about not telling me where you've been and who you've been with? I'm not trying to interrogate you. I'm making small talk, and a lot of people ask questions about how their spouse's day went, including the people they worked with that day. This is very common, but if you think I'm invading your privacy, I won't ask any more questions about today. Why don't I turn the conversation to a more neutral topic like the weather? Don't be so smart, Bob. I thought today was quite warm for this time of year. Have you had a chance to enjoy the warm, sunny day yet? Okay, I'll play your damn game. No, I haven't left the office until now. They brought us sandwiches. You know how much I hate sandwiches. It must have ruined my mood and made me grumpy with you. I'm sorry I snapped at you. It's okay, honey. I love you whether you're grumpy or not. The rest of dinner passed in a less banal atmosphere as we discussed plans for the weekend. The big reveal of the evening was a big lie about where she spent the day. Going through the calls from her phone tonight could be very interesting. When she went to the bathroom, I checked her phone. It was 75% charged. So much for a dead cell phone. As soon as we got home, she went straight to the shower. There were very few days when she showered after work. Maybe in the heat of the summer when she was looking at raw land for development, she showered after work. All of these discoveries I made on just the first day of the investigation. It's amazing what you can find if you start looking. It was important that I continue to remain in the dark as to what I thought was going on. My eyes and ears had to be open and my mouth closed. My ego had to take a back seat or I was finished. In Illinois, adultery is not grounds for divorce, so I didn't need pictures of her having fun with someone. However, to get a divorce, we had to have irreconcilable differences. If I were getting a divorce, I'd have a hard time with it too. More than half of what I'd risked my life for would go to that bitch. My plan was to make my fortune as small and inaccessible as possible. This required some serious thought. I was sitting at my computer doing portfolio reallocation in Switzerland and neither heard nor saw her enter my office. It was a complete lack of security protocol on my part. She asked, "What are you looking at? What caught your eye?" I turned around in my chair and saw that she was looking at my screen from only 4 feet away. I knew that if I tried to hide the screen, she would realize that I didn't want her to see it. So I moved away from the screen and tried to shift her attention to me. I'm just trying to reallocate some of my investments. I need to decide which is better, Google or Amazon. What would you suggest? She paid no attention to the figure, $3,646,962.44, the value of the account. What the hell is that? That's your money? It doesn't have a name on it, just numbers. Unlike her, I felt the need to be honest, at least mostly. Yes, it's my bank account in Switzerland. It's part of the money I made trading goods while I was bored in Afghanistan. Why don't you transfer that money here so I can spend some of it? That money will lie there until I transfer it to the US, then I'll pay a huge income tax on it. They will come back as needed. The million you spent on this house and furnishings was part of that income. It was my gift to you. She said sternly, "Since I didn't know about this hidden account, I want an honest answer to one question. Are there any other accounts outside of the United States that I don't know about?" "Yes." "How many accounts and how much money is in them?" I asked with a smile. You've already exhausted your only honest answer. At first she was angry, then she jumped into my arms and said, "Fine, I want you to keep surprising me with amazing facts about yourself." She smiled radiantly and said, "Great news. I need a Ferrari for a new car, and we can get a bigger and nicer house and then I interjected, "Wait a minute, honey. I do plan to spend all that money on us, but I have a plan, and I'm going to stick to it. We can squander this money this week, but then I won't have the funds to raise it over the next few years. I've made $3.6 million, and I can triple that amount in 2 years. Would you rather have $10 million in 2 years than $3.60 now? Besides, I buy you a new Audi SUV every year to drive around town. You're already taking advantage of my income. You just don't realize how much more I can give you. Please remember this. I can give you so much more by becoming your husband. I love you and I'm only doing this for you." "Yes, I agree," I said with a smile. "Good, then I'm off to my next appointment. I only stopped by to pick up some papers I forgot this morning. I'll see you tonight, sweet boy." I was very angry with myself for not properly navigating the situation. This potential confrontation could have blown up in my face, but it worked out better than I thought it would. I told her pretty much the whole truth, and that made me happy. Maybe our marriage wasn't on the rocks, Maybe I had misinterpreted what was going on. I should have given her credit. After all, we'd been married for 5 years and I'd been away a lot. Was it bad that she was only happy with me when I could lay money at her feet? What was she? A loving wife? A gold digger? Or a gold digger with a boyfriend? The conflict in my mind continued. If she was still committed to me, then everything was great. If, however, she was cheating on me and planning to dispose of all my money as she saw fit, then I needed to be prepared. I needed to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. My preparation began by renting a storage unit and moving personal and professional items there that I might need if I were to leave the marriage in a hurry. My parents were no longer alive and I was an only child, so I had few family items. I saved all the important data on my computer on an external hard drive and put it in my closet. I packed some of my clothes, shoes, and personal belongings in case of an emergency escape, and left the rest in case of a retreat. An army never retreats, but can conduct a strategic withdrawal. I didn't want it to seem like I was leaving. Then, I could leisurely leave at a certain time without looking back. I was doing something I hated to do, but it was better to overdo it at that point than to be caught off guard and not be able to come back. I had a lot to lose, and I wanted to be ready for anything. The most important step involved a trip to Langley to see my supervisor. My request was for a new name for Robert Rogler. I informed my boss that the rebels knew someone was pirating their working capital and now there was a price on the criminal's head. Me. I had two options: quit my job or ask them to create a new identity for me. No consent was forthcoming, but 2 weeks later I had a new passport, Virginia driver's license, social security number, and work history at a secret CIA facility. It was all in the name of Tyler Connors. A buy-sell agreement was drawn up with Betty Black that transferred all of the store's assets to Betty. There was no sale of the company, just the assets, including $50,000 in cash. I sat down with Betty and explained my thoughts to her. Betty, I have a bad feeling about my next trip to the Middle East, and I need to square things with you. If I don't return, I want all of the store's assets transferred to you. That includes all merchandise sold, accounts receivable, and cash in the bank. You're not buying a corporation, just the assets. Any income tax problems will fall on the corporation, not you. I will probably be moving some funds through the corporation over the next few months as I restructure my financial statement. Don't worry, you won't be affected. The purchase price of all assets for you is $50,000, and you will pay my inheritance if I don't return. Do you have any questions? Yes, I do. Why are you doing this for me? You've been my friend and business partner for some time. You've done most of the work. I've been in the background, but there's a catch. Someday Tyler Connors may contact you by phone or email. If so, I ask that you do whatever he asks without question or discussion with anyone else. That includes your husband. I guarantee you that I have nothing to do with smuggling. You will not be asked to commit a crime. Just do him a favor. I am deeply indebted to this man. He has saved my life several times, and I am indebted to him. Do we all understand? I understand, Bob, but I wish you wouldn't talk like that. It's bad luck. Thank you for thinking of me, but I would prefer that you come back and we still work together. That's my wish too, but wishes don't always come true. I wanted to make sure that if something bad happened to me, you would be taken care of. Susan made a firm promise to herself to be a more passionate wife, for in the evenings she almost set our mattress on fire. Mr. Pappas found nothing wrong with her behavior. On several occasions, she disappeared into a luxury apartment building owned by Silas Cohen. She could stay there for hours, and Pappas would try to find out the name and room number of whoever she was meeting with. Susan set aside the last 3 evenings of the following week to attend a seminar in the Home Builders Association convention. She told me she would be returning home late in the evening. I looked over the convention materials on the kitchen table and asked about the dance on Saturday night. She replied, "Yes, a big dress-up party. Best suit or tuxedo for the men and little black dresses for the ladies. There will be a live band and an open bar. I'll probably be home very late." It says here that spouses are invited to the party. Do you mind if I go with you? You say I need to have more fun. We haven't gone to a dance in a long time. It could be fun for both of us. Susan didn't show much enthusiasm. You don't know anyone, and I'll have to work at the gym to make business connections. You might have to sit alone for an hour, and you don't like that without a computer in your lap. I realized that last comment was in the category of snide, but I ignored it. Obviously, I wasn't wanted, and that said I should absolutely go. That's true, but you want me to change, so I'm changing my bad habits by attending events you like. I'm trying to be the kind of husband you said I was. I told Mr. Pappas about the big party the following Saturday night, and he promised that the Hyatt ballroom would have all the necessary equipment set up to pick up every sound near Susan's purse. He also gave me a microphone to record conversations that might come in handy later. This protected me from the fact that he said, she said arguments could be misinterpreted or misunderstood. Also, casual remarks could prove to be valuable information the next day. I could turn the tape recorder on or off with a flick of my hand in the breast pocket of my suit. Susan proved true to her word, choosing to stay home late the first 2 nights of the convention. When she got home, she didn't run to the shower, but snuggled up to me and said, "Good night." Saturday night, I put on my best suit and was in the living room when Susan came down the stairs. She looked amazing. I couldn't believe my good fortune to be married to someone who could look so beautiful. "You look stunning, my dear. That dress suits you so well." Susan wanted to ride in my newest Corvette. The table booked by the bank had seating for 8 people and a great view of the catwalk and dance floor. 2 couples were already seated at our table, and I was introduced as Susan's husband. One of the ladies remarked, "Susan, I thought you said your husband was a computer nerd. If that's the case, why are you here with this beautiful stallion?" All eyes turned to Susan looking for an answer to this difficult question. She smiled, turned to me and said, "Why don't you tell them what you do for a living, Bob? Tell them about your store. Tell them where you go and what you do every 3 months." "I have a computer store on Harrison Street, and every 3 months I go to the Middle East to work on computers for the Army. I don't think that necessarily makes me a nerd, Susan." I noticed a note of irritation on Susan's face when I rebuked her for saying I was a nerd. "Well, you'll always be my favorite computer nerd anyway. Go get us something to drink while I socialize with the people at the other table." And she left. I, on the other hand, went to run an errand to buy a glass of wine for Susan and a beer for myself. As expected, the line for the free drinks had already formed, and I was at the very end. Standing in front of me were 2 realtor ladies who seemed to care who was here. The tallest of them said, "Here comes the most beautiful loan officer in town, fishing out clients with her bait. What's left of her pretty blue dress? I heard she worked very hard to get both construction and permanent loans for the new high-rise Ken's building." "Yes, worked day and night, but mostly at night," the shorter man said. "That's what I heard too," the taller woman said, making them both giggle. "Did you see the rock on her finger? It's just huge. I wonder if her husband knows how much she swings her arms around in the name of business development. She says her husband is a computer nerd and is out of the country a lot. Maybe he just doesn't mind. There are some guys who like their wife to be entertained by someone else." They were next in line for drinks, so I couldn't hear them cackling anymore as they headed for the appetizer bar. Susan wasn't at our table, so I started looking around. She was the only woman in a group of 4 men. The men circled around her like wolves, waiting for an opportunity to devour her. I approached her with our drinks and squeezed my way into the circle of wolves, getting a dirty look from those I stood in front of. "Here's the wine you asked for, dear." She looked almost stunned that I had invaded her territory while she was holding court with her wolf pack. She half-heartedly introduced me to her friends. They all seemed to take my description as a computer nerd. A small, creepy-looking man said, "Nice to meet Mr. Rogler. I'm Sales Kyung." "Nice to meet Mr. Cohen. I understand you are the man in charge of real estate in this town." I didn't feel at all like shaking the clammy hand of this creep who looked like the Grinch from a Dr. Seuss fairy tale, but I shook it nonetheless. "Bob doesn't know much about real estate since he's in computers," Susan cut in, trying to belittle me in front of her wolves. "Susan, honey, computers are for people to learn about things they don't know about. That's how I got the name Mr. Cohen." The Grinch then said, "Your wife tells me you're a very shrewd investor." "Oh, really? I didn't realize she shared my investment strategies with you," I said, throwing Susan a death stare. She found some reason to find a little thread on her arm that needed to be taken care of. "She didn't tell me anything specific about your investment. She only said she was very surprised at how large your portfolio was." I probably should have guarded those investments better so she wouldn't tell everyone about my investments at a public event. By this time, my wife was furious, and so was I. The last thing I wanted was for noisy people to find out about the means I had used to obtain a large sum of money. She does well not to tell me about her affairs. I was hoping she would do the same with me. It was time to leave this conversation. It was nice meeting you, and if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my wife now. I set our drinks aside, grabbed Susan's hand, and dragged her to the dance floor. I hissed in her ear, "You better calm down right now or you're going to ruin both your marriage and your career. Act happy and be happy with yourself, or this night won't be memorable for you. Be a professional, not some schoolgirl with an attitude. Now take 3 big breaths, wait 60 seconds, then smile at me, and we can talk." Surprisingly, for once, she did as she was told. "I didn't like you coming at me like that. I know you didn't like it, but don't you dare tell anyone about my wealth. I don't trust anyone else, including you." That really shocked her. She said, "You don't really mean it, do you? How often do I lie to you? How often do you lie to me?" Another shock to her. She replied, "I've never caught you in a lie." She did not answer my question about how often she lied to me. At this point, one of the wolf pack touched my shoulder and asked if he could dance with my wife. "I'm sorry, but tonight is a special night and we won't be dancing with anyone else. Try next time we get together." He smiled, nodded his head, and went back to the band. After a few songs, we went back to our table and had another drink. I didn't feel like I needed to be here anymore. "I'm done here, Susan, and I'm ready to go home. Are you going home with me or are you staying here?" "I'm torn between staying and going home. This is my job and there are people here that I need to spend time with, but then how will I get home?" I said sternly, "You could call a cab or Uber or get a room for the night. You're a big girl. You can make adult decisions. You make big and small decisions every day that affect your life. You just have to evaluate the risks and benefits of each decision. My decision is to come home. Your decision is what you're going to do here. I hope we both made the right decision." When I finished my admonition, she had a strange look on her face, and I took her hand, held it up, kissed her big diamond engagement ring, and said, "I love you, baby." "I love you too," came the reply. Mr. Pappas's microphone was in the purse she was carrying. I texted him and told him that she was at the Hyatt, and that in the next day or two we would indeed get an idea of what was going on with my wife. He confirmed that his equipment was in place and was already collecting data. She did not return home that evening. It was nearing noon when she arrived at the Uber. Her dress was wrinkled. She walked into the house and thanked me for being her husband. Then she went upstairs to take a shower. My first thought was, when did Hyatt rooms not have showers? I wanted to call out to her but held back. She was tired after a late night and said, "I'd like to have coffee and toast and then go to bed, if you don't mind." After putting toast with her favorite strawberry jam on her plate, I asked, "What did you do after I left the dance?" "First thing I did was dance with Dan Davis, the man you refused to dance with. He didn't take offense at you for refusing to dance. He said he thought you seemed like a nice guy. There were about 20-30 people that I talked to a little bit. Enough for them to realize that I knew who they were and they were important to me." She didn't say when she went to her room for the night, or whether it was someone else's room, nor did she say where she had breakfast. I'll find out from Mr. Pappas what she said when I wasn't around. Mr. Pappas and I met at his office at 10 a.m. Monday morning. We walked into his office and he offered me a cup of coffee. I replied, "I don't know if I want a cup. I probably don't need caffeine considering what you found out about my wife." "Then here's a bottle of cold water for you." I thought, that's not a good sign. "If you don't mind, Bob, I'm going to lay out the information we've gathered in chronological order, starting with the first day on the job and ending Sunday morning." Using the locator on Susan's cell phone, we found out that she had lunch that day at Mr. Sales Ken's high-rise office building. The next time she entered the building, I followed her to the 14th floor, where she entered the real estate office of Dan Davis, a subsidiary of one of Seals Cohen's many businesses. As of yet, we have no audio or video footage of these offices. From this point forward, I am going to provide you with the results of our surveillance, not word for word, all of the conversations she has had over the last 3 days. She told Dan Davis on the phone that she was disappointed in your participation in the Home Builders Convention. She would rather be with Dan that night, eating dinner, dancing and loving all night long. She was going to pretend to be drunk and say she couldn't drive home. Davis made a disparaging remark about your mental faculties, and she interrupted him. She reminded him that she never wanted him to berate you because you are her husband. She told Davis, I'm using you for business connections, so remember your place. If you mention Bob one more time, you can find yourself a new whore. In a subsequent phone conversation with Davis, she said, Eureka, I've made up my mind. You decided what? According to him, Susan said, you need at least $3 million to complete part of the new condominium by selling part of this center. I can get the money from Bob and become an investor in the shopping center. He probably has more money stashed away somewhere, and I can use it to saddle you and sales and build up my portfolio. In a year or two, I can quit this stupid bank job and use that capital to fund other projects. Where'd that nerd get all that money? Davis asked. Careful, big boy. He's not such a nerd if he has $3 million in his account. That's $3 million more than you put in. Let's hold off on the divorce plan until I find out how he's doing with the money. It may be better for us if I stay happily married to him and control all of his money than if I divorce him and only get half. Mr. Pappas continued. At the convention, the only valuable conversation took place when she told Silas Cohen that you could be the source of funding for a share in the shopping center. Then you entered the conversation. After you left the dance, she invited Davis to dance with her. There, she said, Bob has gone home, but he may ask someone to watch me as a checkup. He made some interesting remarks, and I think he suspected something, so we have to be careful. This will be our only dance, as you and I will have to spend the rest of the evening apart. I'll get a room, and sometime after midnight, I'll call you on the phone at the Hyatt to come to my room. Mr. Rogler, I'm not going to retell or repeat your wife's conversation with Davis after midnight or the next morning. It's not something a husband should listen to. It's your property, and you paid for it. But I'll keep them so that if you want to reconcile with your wife, you can listen to what she thinks of you. Would you like to continue the surveillance this week? Slowly, the words came off my lips. Please continue the surveillance for the next 2 weeks and then turn it off. I would like to listen to the recordings, but I understand what you're trying to say. I thank you for helping me keep my sanity and focus on my future. I'm going to need both of those tools. For skydivers, there's a green button near the side door of a U.S. Air Force C-131A that, when lit, means go. You pull up as close as possible to your parachute teammate standing in front of you. Then you dive into your future. Without looking around, without thinking, you just go. Today was my go day. I closed all of my IRAs knowing that Robert Rogler would have to pay ordinary income tax on early withdrawals to his personal account. Robert would also have to pay capital gains tax on the capital gains from the Merrill Lynch account that was closed and transferred to their account. I changed the beneficiary on the life insurance policy to Wounded Warriors Project. The joint credit cards were maxed out to buy Krugerrands. I traded my Corvette for Bitcoins. As Robert, I signed a power of attorney for Tyler Connors to handle any business affairs he might need. The safe was emptied and locked. The funds from the Swiss bank that Susan had discovered, as well as the IRA and Merrill Lynch funds, were transferred to another account in Grand Cayman. I left some of the money in the joint account and transferred most of it to the Grand Cayman account. Robert Rogler would have to pay a lot of taxes to his widow. All the guns, records, gold coins, and important papers that had been stored in the gun safe were moved to the vault. In its place in the safe was a flat box containing $1,000 in $20 bills. In the middle of this impressive stack of bills was a package of Disperse Red 9 Plus tear gas, which bankers use as bait money. When a robber demands money in a drawer, the decoy money is given out first. The package explodes 10 seconds after it is taken out of the box, showering the money and the thief with red dye. In this way, the money is rendered useless and the thief can be identified. When Susan takes the money, tear gas will also be sprayed on her, reminding her of the tears I will shed as a result of her betrayal. On a scrap of paper, I left the combination to the gun safe they had tried to open earlier. That evening, Susan began to persuade me to use some of the Swiss money she had seen to invest in the shopping center. She did not demand, but very subtly made it clear that a woman should make her man do what she wanted. I said, that sounds like an interesting investment for us. We don't have any real estate to take advantage of depreciation and lower taxable income. Why don't you prepare a full analysis for us? I want to know who else is involved in this deal and what the background of each of them is. I decided that this way she wouldn't bother me, and I could finish all the projects I had going on. The next morning, I needed to find a place to live for Tyler Connor, and I decided that Scottsdale, Arizona would be a nice change from Chicago. Having spent 6 months a year in the Middle East, I was used to the hot and dry climate. I contacted a realtor in Scottsdale and asked him to give me some listings for a 4,000 square foot, single-story Adobe-style home with a pool, mountain views, and a golf course for about $3 million. It would be a cash sale, so I could close the deal quickly. It's amazing how the words cash sale and $3 million affect a realtor's enthusiasm. I didn't feel like spending time with Susan at all. The feelings of love and adoration were gone. Hate tried to work its way into my consciousness, but I held it back with sweet revenge. Revenge would make me happy, but hate would not. That's when I realized I was better than some guy who ruins the rest of his life by hating his cheating wife. I will not be defeated by that bitch. My revenge will make me laugh and rejoice whenever I think of her. To refine this concept and keep perspective, I needed to get away for a few days. I told Susan I had to go to Washington, D.C. for a few days to meet with my employers. Instead, Tyler booked a red-eye flight to Sky Harbor in Phoenix to buy a new house. Susan didn't offer to drive me to the airport. The only way I could think of for her to see me off was to confirm I was leaving so that asshole Davis could take my place in her bed. In Scottsdale, I opened my bank accounts as a new man, Tyler Connors. A single man with a lot of money and a desire to spend it. I figured I could do well here. After opening my bank accounts, I directed that $4 million be transferred into my account, $3 million from the Swiss account, and only $1 million from Grand Caymans. The homes presented to me were perfect, and I got what I thought was a good deal on exactly my type of home. I talked to my realtor and asked him for one extra favor. I wanted to ship the items to his office. He was to store them securely until my return 2 weeks after the deal was finalized. For a fee, he was willing to do this for me. I watched the motion-activated videos of our house every night and didn't notice a single suitor or lover. She was working on a prospectus for a proposed shopping center for me. I returned to Chicago with a smile on my face underneath, which lurked a great plan. Susan was sitting in her Audi waiting for me at the airport. "Welcome home, my wonderful husband. I've missed you." "Yes, it's been a long trip." Early the next morning, I dressed quietly and left the house. I didn't feel like talking to her or seeing her. Mr. Pappas was glad to see me, for he had a number of important facts for me to ponder. During the recording from Susan's purse, he recorded that my wife had made several visits to Ken's building, first to Davis's office, then to Mr. Ken's. He said, "It was in Ken's office that Susan, Cohn, and Davis discussed and prioritized options for the use of your money." Taking a sip of coffee, Pappas continued, "Ken seems to have been very successful with his real estate projects. Too successful since he has almost no working capital left. His fortune is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but the capital is tied up in illiquid assets. He doesn't have enough cash to buy a steak dinner. If he doesn't bring in a few million in cash, the monthly loan payments will become defaulted, and the loans will go into default. This will lead to a domino effect, lots of foreclosures, whether they have millions of dollars in equity or not. I thought, Susan is in a tight spot. She wants to be a real estate mogul, not a banker. And she's going to use Ken as a springboard. If Cohen's empire collapses, she will lose the opportunity to become a real estate mogul. The bank will also suffer since she made most of Cohen's loans. If she makes a big loss to the bank, she'll lose her career in banking. And now, some less pleasant information for you, Mr. Rogler. From our hidden camera, you will see on this very short video clip where the meeting went after the emergency meeting to create working capital. With those words, he turned the computer screen and I saw Ken, Davis, and Susan. It was hard to watch. Mr. Pappas turned the screen around and said, "This is more than you need to see." That just confirmed my decision. Susan came home at 6 p.m. and happily prepared a wonderful dinner for us. She asked, "Would you like to review my prospectus tonight?" "Yes, I'd love to," I replied enthusiastically. "Do you want to make a presentation or just have me read it?" She replied, "Let me have a whiskey first and make myself comfortable on the couch." Susan described real estate and its low debt-to-equity ratio very well. The net rental income more than 1.5 times covered principal, interest, insurance, and tax payments, which was very attractive. The other partners were solid people in the real estate world. Everything looked like a good deal, except the Wall Street Journal knew better. The anchor tenants' corporate offices were discussing closing poorly performing stores. Without an anchor tenant attracting customers, all the stores would experience a drop in revenue. They will ask for lower rents. And then there's the low leverage to market value ratio and good credit service coverage. The building's property taxes have not been adjusted in 3 years, and if tax increases in other comparable buildings are an indication for this property, taxes will go up a lot. She said, Mr. Cohen did not want to take money out of this income-producing building, but he was trying to start work on his new luxury condominium project and needed the cash. This is an amazing opportunity for us, darlings. It will fit perfectly into our portfolio, as we will get monthly cash flow and accelerated amortization to cover my income in the Middle East. Wow, that's great. Let me look at the numbers myself tomorrow. I may want to invest more than the $3 million you suggested. Is that possible? I could use some of my other accounts to fund an additional amount. She exulted at the thought that I could invest that money in her financial future. How surprised she was. The next day, I pretended to scrutinize the commercial proposal. This deal was a real turkey that couldn't take off. I called her and asked if she would mind if I showed it to some of my overseas business acquaintances. She replied, "Oh yes, please show it. It will make the deal even better for us." I thought, better for us? Please define what we is. Are we a married couple or two assholes you are mistaking for us? I realized it was about her and her jerks. So I said, I'll call my friends and see what I can do. She replied again, I just adore you. I mumbled something unintelligible in response. I spent the rest of the morning loading my valuable cargo, guns, ammo, gold coins, silver bars, and documents, into a rented Cadillac Escalade for the 26-hour trip to Scottsdale. Things that were forbidden to carry or that I didn't want to entrust to someone else were carefully loaded and hidden. I called Susan and told her that my friends liked the idea but wanted to discuss it in person, so I would fly to Phoenix in the afternoon to meet with them. She was very excited that I was working on getting new investors. She asked, "How much money do you think you can raise?" I could easily risk another $2 million of my own money, and we would get a total of $5 million. Based on my previous conversations, we could add another $5 million from other participants. That would be wonderful, Bob, just wonderful, she squeaked. I had booked a motel room for that night in Kansas City so that I could leave for the long trip as soon as possible. I also hired a security company to watch the car in the parking lot overnight. On the road, I bought a gun safe of the same make and model as the one in Chicago and arranged to have it delivered to Tyler's new home. Sirius Radio was my companion, but it was just background noise that kept me from making plans and plotting. The trip went without incident, and I took the time to gather the bare minimum of household necessities. It was nice to get away from Susan and her constant attempts to give my fortune to her and her buddies. A week later, I returned to Chicago and informed Susan that I had put together a $10 million package for myself and my friends. I told her that our group would need to set up an LLC to hold the investment and spent 2 weeks on that project. Then there was the actual investment document, which took a week to prepare, and then we spent another 2 weeks haggling over terms, costs, and other ridiculous things. Lots of attorney's fees for a project that will never happen. I was stalling, delaying the deal so Ken would burn through all the money he had. Maybe he wouldn't have waited for just my $3 million, but would have waited for $10 million. Greed makes people do stupid things. He was the kind of crook who will take all your money if offered. One morning before Susan left for work, I said to her, "We're almost done with the paperwork. There are only a few items left, but I can see us signing the document as early as this week. We will sign the document as new investors, but the paperwork will state that the deal will not be finalized until the funds are in your bank. This will assure you that we will become investors, but only after the money has been transferred to Cohen's account. All the paperwork will be completed before I leave for the Middle East. The money will arrive in a few days. Now, Susan, we need to discuss our future. I wish you would stop working so hard for others, like the bank. You can take care of our investments and live a more free-spirited lifestyle. Maybe even think about having children. What do you think of that plan?" "I like it, Bob. That would be great for both of us." "How great, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." She walked out of the house, a happy woman. I later learned from Pappas that she was so happy she went straight to Ken's office building and entertained Davis and creepy Ken. Ken made Susan count every million they would make this year. The next week, I went up to Cohen's office and signed the final papers to buy our fictitious company into the mall property. Everyone was happy and congratulated each other. Davis and Cohen looked at me with a smirk that said, "I'm entertaining your wife and bilking you out of $10 million dollars." I smirked back, "You can keep your damn wife and never see a penny of that $10 million dollars. You might not even have a penny left when I'm done with you." Of course, Ken had to come over to me, put his hand on my shoulder and ask, "When's the telegram coming?" "We will collect all the funds in my account in Switzerland and then transfer them to your bank. My money is already in the account, and the others are collecting theirs now. We don't want to do it in installments. All the money will come in at one point. It should arrive soon." Having signed the document, there was only one thing left to do. I had to leave this group of snakes. I timed it so that I would leave for the Middle East the day after signing the documents. The money had to be transferred while I was out of the country. We said a careless goodbye that morning, and Robert Rogler left America for good. The last trace of his stay here was a stamp in his passport at O'Hare International Airport. The first thing I did when I returned to the Middle East was to turn on my computer and check the security cameras in the house. As expected, it was time for Susan to go to bed, but not at 11 p.m., but in bed with Davis. At this point, I set off the fire alarm in this house. It was a huge roaring alarm connected to the fire department. The two of them levitated over the blanket for what seemed like several minutes, trying to figure out what to do. The Keystone cops were funnier to watch. The fire department arrived and spent about an hour with them trying to find the source of the alarm. Finally, they left. Because of the time difference, Susan and I kept missing FaceTime sessions. Usually I was working and she was having fun. It was a few days later when we finally connected. Gone were the words of love and adoration. She growled, "When is the money coming? That document was signed over a week ago. Do we have to send someone to get it?" I laughed. "All the money has already been deposited into my account, and we are ready to transfer it to the US, but the banks here are closed right now. I have to go out on night patrol now, but I will send a telegram tomorrow when the banks open." Changing the subject, "What else is going on besides the need for money?" "Oh, nothing. Same old work. I'm busy, so I gotta go. Love you." "Yeah, me too. Bye." It was the night Robert Rogler died. It was the perfect time for her to be alone. In the house, I turned on one of the emergency fire lights to strobe mode. There was a speaker in the other room ready to sound my message. I turned on the strobe light and saw her jump up from the bed. Then I said loudly, "Susan, Susan, help me. They're killing me. Please help me. No, 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 no. I love you, Susan." Then the lights and the microphone went out. Silence. She was completely out of it. She screamed and cried and sobbed. She could hardly catch her breath. She rushed to the phone and called Davis. "Dan, something's happened. I've completely lost my mind. Bob was being killed and they were calling my name. It wasn't a dream. I got out of bed and was walking down the street when I heard it. I'm so scared. Can you come here?" "I'm a little busy right now. Since it was a dream, it's no big deal. Have a glass of milk and go to bed." "You jerk," I snapped back. At that moment, my phone rang. It was her, and I didn't bother to answer it. Instead, I smashed Bob's phone into 1,000 pieces. Susan had no other numbers she could call to get in touch with me, no contact at all. She was stunned and completely alone. What would she tell Cohen? Where is the money they promised her? None of them, except Bob, knew the other parties to this deal. Without that $10 million, Cohen's conglomerate would collapse under its own weight. I watched her spread a large puddle across the living room carpet. Her plan to create a real estate empire had failed. She would most likely be fired from the bank, and then she would lose her sources of income. Her bank salary didn't cover her lifestyle. Bob's money provided that. She had a $1 million house, but it was in both our names, and without Bob's signature, she couldn't sell it or mortgage it. She could live there, but it was an expensive house that you had to pay taxes, utilities, and insurance on every month. In Illinois, you can declare a person dead after 7 years of no contact. You can declare him dead after 12 weeks if you have proof of his death. An airplane crash into the ocean, a massive fire, or other horrific event must be documented. Neither the U.S. Army, Marines, nor the Iraqi government will issue death certificates. Bob asked his CIA supervisor to freeze his personnel file, not to admit that the CIA had any contact with Robert Rogler, under the pretext of protecting his family from insurgent retaliation. Robert Rogler will cease to exist. Tyler Connors will take over the position formerly held by Bob Rogler. Susan would have to wait 7 years to sell the house. She didn't have the codes to Bob's offshore accounts. The only money she had now was what she had earned from the bank. I hated to part with the $1 million house, but I would still lose at least half of it in the divorce. The remaining $500,000 was a big price to pay for leaving. I watched the drama over the next few days while she hoped Bob was alive. Now we were ready for the final act of the play. Like many other servicemen overseas, their wives and girlfriends often cheated on them. When my Marine buddies found out about my problems, they asked if they could help. You know, beat the crap out of someone. I, on the other hand, wanted something more lasting and fun for myself. The funny thing is, she had no idea that I knew she was a slut, and that I orchestrated the entire collapse of her career and her buddies. Until she was pushed out of the house, I laughed at her impending financial crisis. We went outside where we couldn't see our compound and set up 2 tables covering them with a blue tarp. One of the Marines, dressed in tribal clothing, took an AK-47 from the weapons room and placed it on the table. I sat between the tables with only my head above the blue tarp that was wrapped around my neck. Chalk had been applied to my face to make it gray. My lips were painted dark blue and my hair was salted. Ketchup was splattered all over the table and around my neck. It looked like I had been decapitated and the rebel was holding my head so it wouldn't fall off the table. We took a few pictures from different angles and decided the best one was a straight shot with my blue eyes looking straight ahead. The Marines decided it was absolutely the perfect reprisal for me. 3 weeks later, 2 Marines came to Susan's house and knocked on the door. Davis opened the door and said, "We've already given the money to the Salvation Army," and started to close the door. The closing of the door was interrupted by a size 11 shoe. "We are here to see Mrs. Robert Rogler about her husband." Susan said, "Please come in." The Marines were dressed in dress uniforms, but no name tags. Of course, me and my Marine buddies were watching the whole thing from the security camera. "Are you Mrs. Robert Rogler?" "Yes," the Marines told her. "The informant has a picture of an American killed by ISIS. We think it may be your husband. Since we can't get DNA from the photo, this is our only way of identification." She gasped and turned pale. "Okay, let me see the photograph." She immediately started sobbing. No, 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 no. Why him? We were going to start a family and I quit my job. He called me the night he died. He told me he loved me. My name sounded in his breath as he was dying, and I was a terrible wife. How can I live with myself knowing what I did to him? "Where are the rest of his body parts?" she asked, gradually stopping crying. 30 bodies were dumped in a pit and leveled with a bulldozer. The heads are stacked in a large pile outside the compound. She began to vomit while sobbing uncontrollably. I don't know if it was because she loved me or because of the impending financial collapse she knew was coming. "We're sorry to have such bad news for you. Would you like us to call someone for you?" "No, thank you," she sobbed. As they walked out of her house, one of the Marines took the picture and put it back in his briefcase. Across the block, they were doubled over, laughing at how they'd managed to put that cheating bitch down. Her husband had abandoned her to her fate and kept all of her hard-earned money. As they were getting into the car, they heard Davis yell, "Where's our $10 million? What happened to the $10 million? How do we get to our $10 million? We're all going to go broke if we don't get the damn money." The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.